thought that you knew it all.
Greetings, I'm Madam X here on The Collective. Welcome. We have with us a very distinguished guest, Johnny from Queens, New York. Thank you so much for joining us, Johnny.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful place and wonderful host.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Johnny, we go back quite a few years,
Yes,
back to 97, 98, if I'm
around
not
that time,
mistaken.
saw you doing the performances on stage, reciting poetry, and I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was very, very, well wrote out. I just wish that the audience showed it a little more respect, but it was not the right venue.
Right, it was at a club. I believe this was one of either the vampire balls that was at the vault. Oh, back in 97, 98, something like that.
I've actually been at Coney Island High Place, but I'm not sure.
I think it was at the vault.
Definitely New York.
Yes, indeed. And you yourself are a very talented poet and very creative as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your creative ventures?
Well, I'm mostly visual storytelling, you might say, filmmaking, more or less. And more often than not, it's always vampires, and most of the more interesting elements of the occult that are my muse. It was just something that I wanted to be able to write about around the time that I was reading source material from a book by Basil Copper. I forget the actual name of the book, but I know it was something that I got from the library. I needed to do research on a project that I wanted to make. It was kind of silly back then, vampire superhero thing.
Oh, cool.
Somebody who uses the powers of the vampire to help people rather than kill them. But that was back during like the very early times, and I really didn't know as much back then as I do now.
What is back then? 5 years ago? 10 years ago?
I'd say it has to go back as far as 92, around that time. Definitely as the 1990s were coming in. Back then, role-playing games like Vampire the Masquerade were just coming into vogue, and it just started to get more. It's interesting too. I mean, before then, more of my focus when I was young, since transformation really is my is a kind of a stimulating thing to me as a writer. Werewolves were big with me, but that kind of dissolved into vampires. See, my whole thing about vampires back then, I really didn't see too much of it, because I thought when you get killed by a vampire, you get possessed by a devil, and then you wake up and it's not you anymore. It's just a devil using your body. But in time, after having done the research that I'd done, I grew out of that kind of thinking and as a consequence, it became a little more fascinating to me.
So, what is your perspective on vampirism today?
Well, I feel that most of the media elements out there right now, they're kind of walking a tightrope on this perspective, and it's bothering me in some cases. But thankfully, there are elements out there that have just come into existence. I'd say for about the past, say, 3 or 4 seasons on HBO, that have come into vogue in a way that honors the vampire rather than just uses them as a means to, play at high camp and stuff.
Forgive me, I don't watch too much TV.
We're talking about True Blood.
True Blood,
yes,
indeed. Okay.
Alan Ball's little masterpiece based on a book series that was written. I forget exactly who the author was, but very popular out there right now. I'm collecting episodes on DVR as we speak, and I'm just getting through season 1. I have to catch up from there.
So you actually would recommend those individuals that are interested in the vampire culture and in the vampire myth to watch True Blood?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there might be some aspects. Like I said, I'm still kind of fresh on True Blood. I'm respecting every episode as I watch them. I might find some elements, since I'm notoriously picky about the vampire representation, like for example with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that just completely turned me off.
Oh, really?
I'm not a fan of Buffy's representation.
How about the new films, New Moon and Twilight, Eclipse?
Unfortunately, that's kind of like a dirty word to me. I have no respect whatsoever for the Twilight franchise. Because, and this is by author Stephanie Meyer's own admission, she hasn't really done very much research. I mean, she admitted later, I read an article online, and not from fans, but this was taken actually from legitimate sources, that she didn't really do a lot of research on vampires when she was writing this thing. At the same time, I can kind of understand why she was doing it. I mean, she was trying to appeal to younger readers, but still, I cannot bring myself to exist. As a matter of fact, my first exposure to the very first film in the Twilight series, was actually with friends, and we couldn't help as we were watching it but to just go after it the way they do on this program, Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they talk back to movies in a very,
humorous way,
humorous way, exactly.
Right.
We just couldn't. It's like you see the Indian's face going by, looking very serious.
So perhaps you might approve of Vampires Suck. Have you heard of that one?
As a matter of fact, I saw a preview for that one, and that didn't impress me either, because I could tell you stories, because, they're made by people who just don't know how to do parodies.
Okay. So how about you? Are you involved in filmmaking right now?
Yes.
If you were going to have your input represented in either a film or a series, how would you represent the vampire?
Well, I just do it. I have my own interpretations of vampires.
Which are?
Which are that, you have varying perspectives of vampires out there. But I think the best representations of vampires have always been that have come out of since the Hammer days, the Hammer Films days, with Christopher Lee and fangs in the mouth and pale skin, no latex whatsoever. It's not like you have to make them look all ugly and stuff unless you were trying to justify them turning into bats. But I keep it very traditional in terms of my representation
How about
of vampires.
the eyes? Contacts, no contacts?
Yeah, contacts, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I feel the ideal is when you look at the eye, the color around the blackness of the eye needs to be red to represent the blood, and the eyes should be bloodshot.
So in your opinion, the vampire should be a blood drinker?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that's because otherwise they're separated from normal people. That's part of their allure. They're very, very powerful aspects of the occult. They're very powerful aspects of the undead. They're just like 10 steps above zombies. Who are brainless, of course, but these actually have animated intelligence that stretches. And the other fascinating thing, this is something I really wanted to explore once I go a little further in filmmaking, is to be able to show vampires with the world as their backstory. They're able, like for example, I've always had a vision of having a history teacher, human environment in a schoolroom, where the history teacher is actually teaching the students in some aspect of history, all right? And this history teacher wants people to look at a history book in preparation for an exam.
And your vampire would be an immortal being with personal...
with actual knowledge of this aspect of history.
Exactly.
But here's the rib. Because there's got to be a rib to make it interesting. Because you're looking at the history book. This vampire would basically be looking through the history books. He'd see the time period in which he lived, and he'd see all the lies that were in there, because he was actually there.
Right.
So I would think it would certainly be on more wide appeal than Twilight would ever be, to have that vampire be able to show that person, and maybe even lament in that respect, about the times as they really were. Obviously, this kid would be pushing the prospect of a failing grade, but he'd know. Because
would this kid be a high school student or a college student or what age?
Pick one.
Really?
It could be college age, could be high school age. I would think probably college is a little more, because with college you can be a little more detailed, so to speak. They give you a little more leg room to be able to, the term papers and thesis and so forth. So I think that kind of an approach would be acceptable there.
Now, do you have a website? Where can we get in touch with you?
Well, right now I'm working on a completely different kind of a film series, kind of like a debut series, nonprofit. It's kind of based on the Star Wars universe, but
Okay.
I plan on working on other things from a vampire perspective. In fact, my next project is going to be vampire related, based on the shows that we've been doing in New York City.
Excellent. And where can we find out more information about that?
Well, the best I can do is recommend my Facebook page.
Terrific.
And in there, of course, you can search. I would think you'd probably have to search by way of the project that we're doing. It's Tremors of the Force, Star Wars Tremors of the Force. We're working on that project right now. And I'm on there. I'm the director, writer, and I have a cameo in there. But I just keep creative. It's very, very important that I keep creative.
Terrific. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. And thank you for joining us here on The Collective. Don't forget to subscribe to our videos. We are on YouTube and on VampireLounge.com. I'm Madam X of House of the Dreaming. Thank you for joining us.